All right, so anyway, there's administrator stuff, and then, so you have administrators that have these ideas, and the whole teaching staff, they're all kind of, taught these things that are really misleading. Very well intended, but really misleading. And then parents and other outsiders are looking at this saying that, well, the purple book that doesn't have any numbers in it that claims to be a math book, that doesn't make any sense. But I'm sorry, you're not an educator, you can't know anything, right? Like that's kind of the attitude that is often prevalent in public education. It's been that way for decades. And it's like, well, you guys don't know. I mean, I know stories of like folks in Illinois, they would go to the art teacher and say, hey, you guys, you had an art class, and my kid came home and their shirt was completely ruined, and it won't wash out. And they said, well, I'm an educator. I know this is like washable paint or whatever. And finally, they proved that basically that the art teacher they had permanent paint, right? They didn't have washable paint. And it's like that line, I'm the educator, I'm the expert, you can't know anything. It's, oh, come on, like parents have common sense. We know when stuff's going wrong. People need to trust their instincts. A lot of parents don't though. They're like, oh, you're the professional, I'll accept whatever you do, but you need to question. Politely question, but you do need to question because there's a lot of stuff that's happening in public schools that really does not make sense. And if you as a parent feel like it doesn't make sense, it probably doesn't make sense, right? You don't have to have a degree to smell that something's wrong. So the idea is parents often want different things, but they don't really have a lot of influence. So what's a way to get influence? Well, one is school choice. So you can select your school, whatever it is, public school, private school, charter school, that offers a classical education or a Montessori, or maybe you're really into music or science. It doesn't matter what it is to me, but I think every kid's unique and they're going to thrive in different learning environments, and so we have to provide those options. And then the other thing is, school choice is great, but as much of a school choice proponent as I am, it's not enough, because here's what happens. If you let folks just go and do all kinds of school choice options, they'll have lots of options, and they'll have a theme of science, a theme of math, a theme of music, all these different schools that are focused around these things. It doesn't mean they're actually teaching effectively unless you start to use science to actually improve your teaching, right, for every subject. And so education right now is a belief-based profession, not an evidence-based profession. It's starting to slowly become that a little bit, but I'll give you an example. It doesn't make sense to teach a subject, let's say we're gonna have kids learn a science concept, electricity or something. Do they learn better in groups? That's not the question that's usually asked. A teacher or educational theorist will say, well, we live in a democracy and kids need to learn how to work with each other, and as part of building our democracy, we should have kids learn in groups. Like, well, that didn't answer the question. Is it more effective to teach the concept of electricity and circuits in a group or individually? Like, that's the instructional question, right? It's not about this philosophy of like, we're in a democracy. I agree we're in a democracy. Yes, we have to deal with people, but that's not the issue. I'm trying to get a kid to understand how a circuit works. So if that is more effective done individually, well, let's teach it individually. If it's done more effectively in a group, well, let's do it in a group, right? But often educators are asking the wrong question. It's about their political beliefs and educational beliefs, and I'm trying to create a welcoming environment. Yeah, we all want a welcoming environment, but does that mean that the best way to teach long division is having kids work on a hands-on project? Well, they enjoy it. They might enjoy it, but do they learn it better because they're doing a hands-on activity related to long division, right? So they're often asking the wrong questions in terms of not looking for like objective evidence. It's more, does it adhere to kind of like the way I prefer to teach, right? Rather than, yeah.
But I guess, does this philosophy though, does it embrace the fact that people do need those skills? I mean,
Absolutely.
As I said, I'm a retired coach, I have a PhD, I worked in curriculum development, the whole nine yards. What I have learned in all the years that I've coached people is that they have the technical skills, but often not those, the softer skills. So
I agree.
There still needs to be balance. So what you're saying is it's gone too far to one side.
It's gone too far to one side. Okay. So I would
Both
say,
are needed,
like,
correct?
what's that?
Both are needed.
Both are needed. Oh yeah. I'm not at all saying you shouldn't. In fact, there's an order to it. I would generally recommend, like, if you're teaching something that's new, you're going to start with very small tasks, very direct instruction, right? Get the kids to a certain point, say like learning addition facts or something. Then you give them word problems. Then you might have a discussion about how we can work in a group. Then you might give them an activity where they're doing word problems in a group, right? It has to progress. where the constructivist approach is like, okay, we're going to learn how to do these word problems in a group by and the math facts all in one lesson. It's all embedded. They like to use the word embedded. You'll hear this a lot in education circles. It's embedded. It's like, no, embedded means it's not systematically being taught in a way you can actually build up to the thing you're trying to do. And so that's kind of the thing you'll hear from me, is just building up systematically in a logical way, which is why I like classical education, because that's what we do. So here's some books you guys can read. They're great. These will be posted online. Folks can take pictures if they want, but there's a lot of myths and misconceptions about teaching. I'm going to go through some of them right now. So this is the stuff that education schools, we hear a lot about. Learning styles, right? There's like 40 years, I think I should update the slide, I think it's 50 years now of research that have not found evidence that there are visual, kinesthetic, and auditory learners, or that teachers can achieve better results by appealing to them. So the actual rule, based on research for teaching, is you don't teach in the student's best modality, right? So the idea is they prefer visual learning or they prefer hands-on. You actually teach in the content's best modality. So if you're trying to have kids learn that like the coats that they made out of the woolly mammoths were warm, you might give them like a sample like faux woolly mammoth coat and have them wear it so they could feel it. That would be kinesthetic and they would get that because they could actually feel the warmth, right? If you're teaching geography, well, it's a visual task because you have to know where things are, right? So you actually teach in the content's best modality. It's a wonderfully noble effort to try to teach in the student's best modality, but it just hasn't been shown to work. That's the issue. And so they've done experiments, and what really matters is the clarity of your presentation. It doesn't actually matter the modality, right? It's how clear can you make this. And sometimes, geography, the clearest modality is showing you a map, right? Like certain things are just better than others based on the content. And the other thing about learning styles is they found is it actually can change during the day, right? And during the subject. Like some kid might claim to be visual in math, but kinesthetic in science, or vice versa, right? So, and then you have 20 to 30 kids. So how can you actually teach in everybody's preferred modality at the same time? But it's just also has practical limits. Even if the theory were true, how could you ever do this? You'd have to identify all the kids that learn better visually in math and group them for math over here, but then maybe they're different. There's a lot it's kind of a mess. It becomes a mess very quickly. And then multiple intelligences, these are really just talents, but the idea was that there are 7 different kinds of intelligence, he thought, based on different parts of the brain. This is Howard Gardner, who had this theory. And even he said educators took this way too far. They were really misapplying this theory. This was really popular in FCPS maybe 15 years ago. It's I haven't heard them talk about it as much, but that was a big thing for a while. Rote memorization is bad. This one is still an educational thing, right? Oh, you're just going to have kids memorize things and they'll never understand it, right? You hear this a lot, but you have to understand that you need factual knowledge, and that is often acquired through memorization. But there's a limited amount of memorization that's actually rote. Rote means memorizing something with no meaning whatsoever. So for instance, when we learn the shape of the letter A, there's nothing inherent about the shape of that letter A that makes it say ah, right? It doesn't need to be that a capital A, it doesn't need to be a tent. It's just a convention that it looks like a tent with a line through it. It's just something that has to be memorized and learned. There is no inherent meaning to it whatsoever, right? So you have to understand that rote memorization is required for rudimentary knowledge. It's a good thing. Now you quickly get from that rote memorization to more meaningful things. And you can and should memorize things in a way that it makes them meaningful, because you will remember them better. Every thought, every concept that you have is like intellectual Velcro, and if you get enough of them, more thoughts stick to that, and you remember, because in your brain they form like a network, and so now you have associations, and they're all kind of tied together. You can almost view it like a knot or a web in there, in your brain. So rote memorization is not bad, but you do need to make meaning, but folks shouldn't skip that first step, right? And that's you'll get a lot of that from the whole language people. Well, let's have kids do meaningful literature. Well, they don't know how the language works yet. They need to understand how to decode the word cat, C-A-T, and that's going to be a lot of rote memorization of what letters make what sounds, what shapes mean what, right? And that's just, there's no way around that. The goal is to get to the point where that's so automatic that your brain isn't consciously thinking about it, and you are focused on the meaning of the sentences and enjoying the literature. But you can't skip ahead to that, which is what the balanced literacy coach is trying to do. All right, the eclectic teacher, so the idea that every teacher's an artist, they can just string stuff together, and they're gonna be so creative and meet everyone's needs, it's gonna be beautiful, that they can just customize. But what really happens here, if you look at large-scale research, it's actually the well-designed, very logical steps type of validated curricula that use a consistent approach for all students. And they do offer modifications, right? It's not like everybody learns exactly the same thing. That if we detect that a child is having difficulty in something, they usually have standard, like you would in medicine. If your first drug doesn't work, you go to your second and your third option, right? So that's how teaching should be. That's what the large scale research shows. If you are more structured about it, you can get better results. And this comes from, among other things, the largest study ever done in human history, which is called Project Follow Through. You can Google it. It was part of President Johnson's war on poverty, and they found that direct instruction, which is not just the general act of like directly instructing someone, but actually a program that had been researched where they actually watched the kids and they videoed the kids and they looked at their faces and they tested the lessons, and they actually gave you a script and they figured out what word would most efficiently teach the concept, and they kept refining it until almost every kid got it every time. And now they have these like polished gems of a lesson and a whole sequence to teach like reading and math and other things that works for the vast majority of kids. And what's so great about this program is what they did is they used this mostly on low income kids. That was the whole, it's called direct instruction, or now it's known as DISTAR, D-I-S-T-A-R.
Okay.
And they had the best results ever seen. And they had like 10,000 kids participate or something. This is a huge program. It's like over $1 billion. I think it ended in 1992, but I want to say it started in like the 60s or 70s. It was decades. Nobody talks about this in education circles.
I've never,
Yeah, nobody's like, I didn't know this thing. Yeah, this is literally the largest largest study ever done in human history. We did in America. We found out what worked, and then we promptly ignored it, right? And so what happened was, and you may be, if you're familiar with how education works, you may know this happened. The folks that wanted and preferred it had a belief in the other systems of teaching that didn't show the results that DISTAR did, basically lobbied to, get everybody's results like presented as, oh, they're all good, there weren't any meaningful differences. So you can read through, there's an ABDT, Apt Associates report, there's a whole, you can, if you want to see the history, I can give you the history, I don't want to belabor it too much. All right.